Welcome everybody to the Tampa Equality Means Business Roundtable Luncheon. We are so excited to have you all here today. We have a great crowd, and as I expected, there are just enough really important and fabulous and amazing people here that it took forever to get you sat down. So we're going to try and move our agenda along here and maybe shave off a few minutes. But I wanted to start by introducing myself. I'm Joe Saunders. I'm the director of the Equality Means Business program, a program of the Equality Florida Institute. I wear another hat sometimes as a state representative from Orlando. We have some special guests in the room tonight that I want to acknowledge as an elected official sometimes. I know how important it is to get the shout out and how important it is for us to acknowledge that they're here and ready to have this conversation with us. First, I want to acknowledge that, and I'm sorry if I butcher your name, Digna Alvarez. Yes. Is that right? From Senator Bill Nelson's office is here. We've got a very good friend of mine and someone who I'm so excited is in the room today, Commissioner Kevin Beckner from Hillsborough County. One of our featured speakers today cannot go without mention. Mayor Bob Buckhorn from Tampa is here. And, of course, somebody who we all know, the former Chief Financial Officer of the state of Florida, Alex Singh. I wanted to start us off by just telling you a little bit about this room that you're a part of, and really about some fascinating things that are happening in Florida. I am 31 years old. I graduated, I'm born and raised Floridian. I was born in South Florida in Fort Lauderdale, and I grew up in a city called Coral Springs. And I came up to Orlando like many of the children in my family. There's 5 kids in my family, and 4 of us went to college in East Orlando, in the area that I get to represent in the Florida legislature now. And we attended the University of Central Florida. And while I was at UCF, I studied political science, and I studied women's studies, and I studied the legal system. And what attracted me most to those fields when I was in school was the desire to fully understand social movements, social justice movements. I was so committed to paving a path for gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people in Florida. And I wanted to know how other people had done it. And so, without much of a roadmap at the time, other than the women's movement and the civil rights movement, I began to look back at our collective and shared history to figure out how they'd done it. And I want to be cautious as I tell this story because I think it's always really important to say out loud that none of those bodies of work are done. There's plenty of work to do in the women's movement. There's still work that needs to be done around civil rights. But if we look backwards in time, we can see that there were these pivotal moments when something tipped and something changed. And the walls that had been built around cultural institutions and cultural change, legal institutions, and political institutions, the blockades that existed to major transformative pieces of legislation like the Civil Rights Act and other things like it, that there was this moment in time when things tipped. And so I studied these movements in college, and I got deeply involved in the work to create equality and opportunity for LGBT people here in Florida. And I became something of an activist. In 2005, I was hired by Nadine and Equality Florida to be a field organizer. I eventually became the statewide field director for the organization before I moved into some new roles. And through the course of that time, there were 2 books that came into my radar, into my purview. One of them was a book called Married to the Mouse. And some of you might have read it. It was a New York Times bestseller. It was written by a guy named Rich Vogelsong, who's a professor of history and politics at Rollins College. And Married to the Mouse is a book that charts the relationship between Disney, which is obviously a huge institution in my neck of the woods, and its relationship to local government and really all of the different institutions that define who Orlando now is. And the other book that came across my radar was a book written, it was really an anthology that was consolidated by a guy named Ron Kilburn, a Floridian historian. And it was called From Yellow Dog Democrats to red state Republicans. And it charted the political path in Florida all the way through the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, and the transformation of what we understand Florida politics to be today. And wrapped up in these very big books that touched on all kinds of really interesting and fascinating and diverse topics, there were two mentions that always drew me in. And it was a story that both of these authors told about Orlando at a time when the civil rights movement was hitting its peak, when Jim Crow was being challenged and segregation was being challenged in so many different directions. And for those of you who are students of the civil rights movement, you may remember that one of the strategies of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, one of the strategies of Martin Luther King and many of the activists was to bring the media's attention onto the inequities in Florida, to bring the national consciousness into states like Florida, where segregation was creating separate pathways and blockades to equal opportunity. And both of these authors, in some of the most articulate ways, pointed to a dynamic that I think is so important for the conversation we're going to have today. They pointed to the fact that one of the tipping moments, one of the moments when everything broke open and the culture of segregation, not one specific law, not one specific policy, but the culture of inequity that was intrinsic within Jim Crow and segregation, cracked open. And that moment was when leaders in tourism who, in Orlando, were desperate to start an industry that was burgeoning, that we now know today completely transformed not just East Orlando, not just my district, not just East Central Florida, but the entire state, that they saw the writing on the wall, and they knew that the story of who Florida was would affect whether or not this brand new industry would be able to grow, thrive, and transform the economics and really the quality of life of the entire state. And so they sided on the side of the desegregationists. I think we're in a similar moment in Florida when it comes to the LGBT community. And there are three examples of this that I want to point to. When I first started with Equality Florida, I was hired by Nadine I was a field organizer, and I was super scrappy, and I'd been doing all this like LGBT advocacy work on my campus. I had organized a statewide conference, and she was the keynote for. And at some moment in her craziness, she thought, this guy would be great to run our Pride program. Which really, in translation, means we need somebody who's really young and has a lot of energy and doesn't mind sweating in the sun to grab a clipboard and go to 22 of the funnest parties that are thrown around the state and represent Equality Florida and sign people up and engage them in the work. So at the time, I thought that was like the most amazing job that anybody, I was like, you're gonna pay me to do this? I thought I would pay you to do this. But at the time that I first started running the Pride programs for Equality Florida, it was a rare thing to see Disney marching in a Pride parade. It was an anomaly to see Macy's standing next to PFLAG. And now if you go to almost every single Pride across the state, what you'll see is corporate partners, employee resource groups, some of the best known brands in our state and arguably the country standing right next to everybody who's in this room and the organizations that we support. So the first example I would give you of this tipping moment, this moment when the economics of equality are resonating within the corridors of corporations, is the philanthropic support that we've seen funnel towards organizations like Equality Florida, our Pride organizations, and all the nonprofits that many of us are a part of. Equality Florida's corporate sponsorship program, which some of you are members of, has quadrupled in size since I began working with the organization almost over 10 years ago. The second example of this new engagement, this important moment that I think we're seeing, is something that's just come together just recently. When I go up to Tallahassee, I take off my 501c3 Equality Florida Institute hat and I put on my legislative hat, and I get to be the sponsor of a bill called the Competitive Workforce Act that, if passed, would finally bring Florida into what I believe is the 21st century. It would ban discrimination. It would add our community, the LGBT community, to the state's non-discrimination laws, banning discrimination against the LGBT community in employment, housing, and public accommodations. And for the first time this year, we saw a brand new coalition form for the purpose of directly advocating and lobbying for that bill. And that coalition is called the Business Coalition for a Competitive Workforce. It was convened and chaired by Disney. It started, because I am from Orlando, it started with many big companies in Orlando. Disney and Darden were some of the first to come together We have gotten partners like Florida Blue, the University of North Florida, and many others have come together to put resources on the table specifically for the purpose of advocacy and lobbying on this one specific policy that they believe is in their company's best interests and the best interests of the state of Florida. But the third example and area that I want to point you towards that I think is the best highlighter of this incredible moment that we're in, this moment that is not the same as that moment I described in the 1960s in Orlando, but has overtures of similarity, is the moment that's created this room that you're sitting in right here today. In the same way that Jim Crow wasn't one law, it wasn't one policy. If anything, it was a culture. It was a stream of ideas that was pulling together inequity in the state of Florida. There is a culture of inequity when it comes to the LGBT community in Florida. And it's going to take some big thinking, a 20,000-foot perspective on how to unpack that and unravel it. And what's exciting about this room is that it is the product of many, many years of brainstorming and thinking and bringing lots of different ideas to the table. And it's an expression of the Equality Florida Institute, a non-political, non-lobbying organization. We're not going to talk about one specific law here today. We're not going to talk about really any legislation today. What we're going to talk about are big ideas about what a culture of exclusion does to the story of who we are and how it affects any number of sectors in our economy, how it affects our ability to grow, how it affects our ability to retain and recruit talent, and how it affects our ability to create a talent pipeline that brings Florida's economy not just into full recovery, but really into a leading space in the 21st century. Equality Means Business is, again, a non-political, non-legislative program that sets this table all the time. We've done it at roundtables across the state. We just did an incredible one in Miami that we're still seeing all kinds of amazing synergy and energy come out of. We've done one at the Orlando Chamber of Commerce. We've done them in St. Pete. We did a huge one in Tallahassee. We've been all over the state on this tour, telling a story, but also getting feedback about how leaders in business and leaders in economic development can and should be a part of the conversation to change Florida. So that's Equality Means Business. We are, in terms of structure, again, we're a program of the Equality Florida Institute, and our leadership structure is made up of an advisory board of members. Alex Sink is one of our founding members. We have representation from C1 Bank, Tech Data, Morgan Stanley, Winn-Dixie, CSX, the University of Miami is one of our newest members, Haskell Construction, the University of North Florida, PNC Bank, Florida Blue, US Trust, Symantec, Carlton Fields, Wells Fargo. You have to read all of them or people get mad. Moffitt, HSN, the Weston Diplomat, Citi, Tropicana, JetBlue, Creative Cities, and On Top of the World. We have a cross-section of the leaders in a diverse spectrum of industries in our state. Some of the largest employers in our state, some of the most powerful voices in corridors of power, whichever they may be, sit at this table. And it's so exciting to have you at this table because there are so many of you that we know, and we're glad you're here to lend your voice, and there are even more that we don't. So welcome, 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 welcome. It is my honor to start us off by introducing us to our first keynote speaker. Mayor Bob Buckhorn was sworn in as the 58th mayor of the nation's 53rd largest city on April 1st, 2011. Mayor Buckhorn believes Tampa's strength is in its diversity. He is focused on building an environment that will move Tampa to the next level and generate brand new economic opportunities. Mayor Buckhorn graduated from Penn State University in 1980 with a degree in political science. He is married to Dr. Catherine Lynch Buckhorn, and they have 2 daughters. Please join me in welcoming the mayor of Tampa, Mayor Bob Buckhorn.
Joe, thanks, and thanks for all the great work that you're doing up in Tallahassee. And to all of you that are here today, some old friends like Alex Sink and obviously Kevin, to some of our new friends that are here, and particularly to some of our corporate leaders that are here today. You know, there's a lot of things that I am proud of this city for. And I'm going to tell you a funny story about a conversation Nadine and I had, what was it, 2 years ago, Nadine? When the Equality Index came out. And I'm a pretty competitive guy. I mean, my kids will tell you that I'd rather die than lose anything, even if I'm competing with my 8-year-old daughter. And we were, what were we, third place, Nadine? Second place? We were behind Orlando. That's all I knew. Hey, careful, Joe. Wait till you hear the rest of the story. We were behind Orlando. And I called up Nadine, and I said, Nadine, this is wrong. This can't possibly be right. And more importantly, Nadine, if it is right, tell me how I fix it. Because I want to be number one. I'm not going to let Buddy Dyer have bragging rights over my city. But more importantly, I wanted to do it for the right reasons. And so Nadine gave me a roadmap as to what it would take to be successful in this year's grading of Florida cities and who would end up at the top of the heap. And I am proud to tell you, not that I'm bragging, Joe, but that Tampa is the #1 city in the state of Florida amongst big cities on equality issues. And the reason that's important, and just as I was competitive with Buddy Dyer over this, understand that we're competing, and I look at guys like Gary Sasso here, running a major, major law firm in this country. We're competing for intellectual capital. We're competing for the best and the brightest talent that we can find all over the globe to come and be a part of this amazing place that we call Tampa, Florida. I mean, we're in competition every day for these bright young people. And they want to know, as individuals or as corporations, that all of their employees are going to be treated fairly, and that all of their employees have the same value in our minds, and that all of their employees, if they were to choose to locate here or come and be a part of this community, would be treated fairly regardless of their station in life, the God they worship, or who they love. And so for me, it always gets back to competition. If I'm going to be able to compete for the best and the brightest, if I'm going to be able to grow this economy, if I'm going to be able to create an environment here that my kids will want to inherit, where we celebrate the great diversity of this city, a city celebrated and founded by Italian, Spanish, and Cuban immigrants. I mean, we look like America in all of its shades and diversities and hues and genders and orientations. That's what makes us so special. And if we build on that, we are far more competitive. And so that's why the business leadership that is here today, the business leadership that gets that, and when Gary goes out to compete for young lawyers, they're going to want to come to a city that celebrates that diversity as a strength. He is a much better law firm when he can go out and get that talent, the best talent in the country, who wants to come and be a part of Tampa because they know that everyone's value and everyone's uniqueness is honored. That is important stuff. That's why last year, even though it wasn't my city, when they invited me to walk in the Pride Parade, I said, hell yes, I'm coming. And did what no mayor had ever done before. Not because it was, you know, they were going to write about it, but I thought just my mere presence there would speak volumes about our community and where we're going. Now, St. Pete's got its own mayor that's going to march and lead that parade, and I couldn't be prouder of Rick Kreisman, and it's going to send a signal about where St. Pete is going as well. That's important. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Nadine, for giving me a roadmap to victory. And now you got to give me a roadmap as to how to stay there. I'm looking at you. I know you're the grader. But to think we now have 500 people signed up on a domestic partner registry, to know that because of what we did here in this community, that it's spread to almost every other community. Kevin, let's go. You got to get those guys going over there. Vote twice. I'm Irish. I know how to do that. All you need is one more vote, I think. Right? All right. We're a beacon. We really are a beacon in this community. We need to maintain that presence and keep pushing and keep speaking loudly about the value of treating people with respect and the value of equality and how it affects our bottom line, because it really does affect our bottom line. And we are so much better because of it. And that city that I will turn over to my 2 little girls will be a better place because of what you guys are doing here today. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Mayor Buckhorn. It is my privilege to introduce you now to someone who, on the national level, is an architect of the Human Rights Campaign's Municipal Equality Index, Kat Oakley.
Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Yep. All right. Well, it's pretty tough to follow that, and I think I'm going to take this tape and show it to my boss and hopefully get a raise, because that is our messaging. It's, I think talking about municipal equality is my privilege to do, so I'll just back up for a second and explain a little bit about who I am, but it's amazing to me when I see local officials who take this so seriously. It makes me feel happy. It makes me full of confidence for our world, and I'm very pleased that you're here, and I love every single talking point, and I'm gonna just wrap it all up and repackage it as I do my roadshow. So my name is Kate Oakley. I'm Legislative Counsel for State and Municipal Advocacy at the Human Rights Campaign. And the Human Rights Campaign is the nation's largest organization working for LGBT civil rights. And as part of that, I have a couple main things I do in my job. One of the most exciting is that I am the author of the Municipal Equality Index. And the Municipal Equality Index, we just put out this past fall, we put out our 2nd edition. We are already working hard at work on our 3rd edition. And the Municipal Equality Index rates, this past year rated 291 cities. This year we'll rate 353 cities on the basis of how inclusive their laws and policies are of LGBT people. You all may be familiar or more familiar with our Corporate Equality Index, which is sort of, I think of as our big sister index. They've been around for over a decade, and they have really contributed to part of this conversation about why equality is good for business. What is it exactly that corporations are doing? Why do they value this? And the CEI has been a way to both measure that and to talk about it. So the CEI, like I said, has been around for about a decade. They rate many different kinds of corporations. Some they do on their own, some people come to them. And affiliated with this is both our best places to work insignia and also buying for equality. So, which recently has been turned into an app, which is pretty cool. So like if you're standing in a strip mall and there's, for example, like a Lowe's on one side and a Home Depot on the other side, you can look up who has the better score and then walk to where they are, which I think is really fantastic. And it's interesting to see over the time that the Corporate Equality Index has been out, think about how much things have changed in the last 10 years. It's remarkable. I mean, it's inspiring, it's amazing. I personally feel so fortunate to be doing this work at this time. I feel like this is something I'm going to be able to tell my kids about. They won't even be able to imagine what it was like, and I'm really excited to be part of it. I think it's also indicative of how powerful the arguments are, both to the corporate community and also, I think, to the municipal leadership about how important municipal and corporate equality are. So as a measure of that, as people have become more comfortable, as people have come out at work, as people are coming out in their communities, as, for example, we are being counted on the census, and some of us are being counted on the census for the first time, there's starting to become this idea of who we all are. And there are lots of estimates about what LGBT buying power looks like. One of them is that LGBT people contribute about $800 billion to the economy. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And so one of the ways that the LGBT community has really become to make itself be heard is to talk about that, right? And we're not just talking about weddings, although, of course, now as marriage becomes increasingly widespread, people are getting married. There's sort of this pent-up demand for marriage, so that's happening. And they're the prettiest, loveliest weddings you ever could see. And honestly, so full of joy after people have been waiting. It's wonderful. But it's not just that, because in addition to some of us wanting to get married, there are all of the other things that we do with our lives. We're going on vacation, we're buying groceries, we're going to restaurants, we are staying in hotels, we are getting jobs and creating jobs, and we are very much part of the economy. And so one of the ways that we have been able to sort of have our voice heard in a better way is for people to start taking that part of who we are seriously. It's something that the corporate community really has embraced. And as the Corporate Equality Index measures corporations to see where they are on this scale, the Corporate Equality Index found this past year that 91% of Fortune 500 companies offer sexual orientation non-discrimination policies, and that 61 of them offer gender identity protections. So that's a big deal, and I think it shows that how far corporations are in front of the rest of the country. So I'm sure everyone in this room knows this, but we don't have those protections, those non-discrimination protections at the federal level. You unfortunately do not have them here in Florida yet, although hopefully you will soon. But there are only actually 18 states that have non-discrimination laws that include both sexual orientation and gender identity. So it's not just Florida, there are lots of places that are out there that still have this work left to do. And in addition, as marriage is sort of sweeping the country, and hopefully marriage will be here soon as well as everywhere else, one of the things that I've started to hear only really in the last couple months is people saying, we don't want to be left behind. Before, maybe we were a little nervous to be on the cutting edge, but this is happening now, and we want to be part of it. So that's sort of another interesting dynamic that has come from that. So LGBT people as consumers are this one way in which the LGBT community has really been able to say, look, if you're a business that operates according to equal principles, if these things are important to you, they're important to us, and we will vote with our dollars, and we'll show you what we support. So that's one way that people have gotten power. Another is that corporations have really taken to heart, businesses have taken to heart, that the people who work for them may be LGBT, or if they're not LGBT, they may have people who are LGBT that they care about. They may be people who consider themselves to be fair-minded people. And this is something that we see in both the business and the municipal context, that when people are looking for places that they perceive to be diverse places, even if they themselves are straight, they will use LGBT inclusion and equality as a proxy for whether or not this is a welcoming, diverse place to be. And it's something that, as I said, the corporations are starting to do this with their own policies. Businesses are starting to do this with their own policies. And they're starting to recognize that when people come here, they need to not just be not discriminated against while they happen to be at work. That employees are people who have 24-hour-a-day lives, and that their lives are not contained to the 8 hours that they are at work. So perhaps they are fortunate enough to work for an employer. Perhaps they have made sure to seek out in a job with an employer who protects them when they're at work. But what about the rest of the time? And that's where there's sort of this transition over to talking about the city that they live in, the place that they live in. Because people are 360-degree people, and they're only at work 8 hours a day. So even if they work for the most fabulous, fantastic, accepting employer who has every intention of, and in fact does, respect who they are and their family and everything about them, make sure they have completely equal benefits, at the end of the day, they're going to get in their car, they're going to drive, fill up their gas tank, they might go out to dinner, they're going to go home, they're going to be with their family, they're going to go out to restaurants and theaters and grocery stores. They're going to have a nightlife. They're going to go out and have this rest of their life. And if the city that they're in doesn't do things like protect them from discrimination and public accommodations, that's something that could have a real effect on that person's life. Or what if they're not able to get housing? Because even though they're not discriminated against at their job, it is really difficult for them to find an apartment. So this is where it becomes a question of the whole person. And employers, as the mayor said, are looking at places where they think people will want to go. Because this model of, I have a steel mine and people come and work for my steel mine, and so they will come to where I am, that model is not the way our economy works anymore. The way our economy works now is that instead, people are where they are. They're going to places that they find to be exciting, dynamic, welcoming, diverse places. And businesses are following them. They're going to where these people are. And so for a city to be a place that is truly competitive in this our current and coming economy, they have got to show that this is a place where people should want to live, where they want to live the 360 degrees of their lives. And one of the things that I have been so privileged to be part of with the Municipal Equality Index is to see, I think it's easy as a movement to talk about how challenging things are at the federal level, how challenging things are at the state level. But one of the things that's been so inspiring to me is to see that cities really do take this seriously, and that cities understand that people live these 360-degree lives, and that it's so important to have a place where people feel welcome, not just for people who are LGBT, but also for the people who care about them, also for the employers who are looking to hire people who really value that kind of a diverse experience, which is something that, by the way, millennials in particular really, really do take seriously. The author of the report that I work on, the Municipal Equality Index, the author of that, I'm sorry, I'm the author. She says all kinds of great things I'd be happy to share. The person who wrote our introduction is Richard Florida, and I don't know if some of you, Mayor's nodding, many of you may know a little bit about who he is, and he does research on demographics and the economics of development in cities. And one of the things that's just so fantastic about his research that just fits perfectly with our project is that he says that in particular, tech companies, people who we think of as being sort of job creators, these people are, as I described with the steel mine, the businesses are looking for people who care about diverse environments, not just about their employer, although that's absolutely important, but also that the city that they're in has to be diverse. And he has shown that property values are higher, that the economy grows faster, and not just population growth where there are lots of people, but that jobs follow that, because businesses want to go where people who value diversity are. And it's been a wonderful piece of information for us as we're talking about municipal equality. And you know, I appreciate the competitive nature, and I completely and totally validate and will continue to stoke that. And it's great to hear that people have more than one reason to do this, right? It's the right thing to do. I don't think anybody disagrees it's the right thing to do, but people are busy, and there's lots of other stuff going on. So it's great to have a second argument, which is, it's the right thing to do, it will make your city a better place, and hey, you can rub somebody else's nose in it, which is pretty fun too. Just saying. So it is really wonderful to see how everything is changing, and it's great to see, you know, my colleagues who do the Corporate Equality Index, they're experiencing incredible change. They have people who are signing on to the kind of work that we do who wouldn't have a decade ago. When Prop 8 came out, there were very few corporations who were willing to say that they believed Prop 8 was wrong. Last year, when the Defense of Marriage Act was in front of the United States Supreme Court, we had literally hundreds of businesses sign on to say that the Defense of Marriage Act should be repealed. And with our current effort to pass the Employment Non-Discrimination Act at the federal level, we have 120 businesses signed on to that. It has just become a different situation where corporations appreciate the need for equality in their own work, but also to be advocating for it, and also to be showing that it's not just an internal policy, but that it's an external policy. And as I said, the same is true for cities, and it was my privilege this year as part of the MEI. We had 25 100-point cities, and 8 of those cities came from states where they didn't have marriage equality or state-level non-discrimination law. So that means that those cities reached 100 because of the work that they themselves did. And Tampa has an 89, they're practically there, you know. We'll see just a little bit over and I'm happy, and I know Nadine is happy to help get you right up there. And I mean, it really is great to see that cities are taking that so seriously. So that's pretty much my spiel, but equality means business, and thank you all so much for being here.
All right. Well, my name's Nadine Smith. I'm a CEO of Equality Florida and Equality Florida Institute. And, you know, when we began this program, we said our goal was to improve Florida's national and international reputation as a welcoming and inclusive place to live, work, and visit. We're going to have to add study because University of North Florida and University of Miami have joined as well. And you all are part of making that happen. I spend an awful lot of my time with business leaders. I've spent more time with Republicans in the past couple of years than ever before, in part because there's so many business leaders who understand that this issue, this diversity issue, is not just about making a better environment for LGBT employees. It's about making an attractive environment for the people who really fire up the economy, smart innovators, young people deciding where they're going to go. And I'm thrilled that not only, how many companies here have a 100% rating on the Corporate Equality Index? All right, you see a lot. Congratulations. And that's phenomenal. That leadership is quite incredible. I'm thrilled when I hear from folks, as I have quite recently, who say when they are talking to people about what kind of company they are, who they're recruiting, they make a point of including the fact that they have that rating. And someone told me just a couple of days ago that they used the fact that they were on the Equality Means Business Advisory Board to lure someone away from a competitor who isn't. So it is building exactly what we had hoped it would build. And so you heard about this from the perspective of a public official who wants to make sure his city is seen in the light that draws the people that will help our economy and be a better place for his children to grow up. You've heard from the grader at the national level for the Municipal Equality Index. We think it's important that you hear from people from inside companies about what it means to have your company be a leader in this way. And I'd like to invite two people up right now. One of our newest members of the Equality Means Business Advisory Board is Dr. Julian Sanchez. He's with Moffitt. He's a surgeon. We have been partnering with, come on up, Julian. We've been partnering with Moffitt over the last, well, actually, one of our members is on the Diversity Advisory Board. We're doing some outreach around health issues together. And please welcome Dr. Julian Sanchez. And I also want to invite someone who has been with the Equality Means Business program from the very beginning. He has put a lot of blood, sweat, tears, intellectual property into helping shape what Equality Means Business is. And so much so that his company has really become our chief corporate sponsor in bringing Equality Means Business all around the state. And his boss actually chairs the Florida Businesses for a Competitive Workforce that's lobbying for a statewide bill in Tallahassee. Please welcome Nick Korth. So I do just want to say quickly that the tenor of the conversations have changed. I was actually, as Minnesota was going through the marriage battle, their companies, General Foods, whoever, Betty Crocker and Kellogg's, General Mills, thank you, okay. So their top diversity guy was speaking at this conference I was at, and he said, you know, when we were deciding whether we were going to come out for marriage equality, he said there was just a lot of, tension, there was a lot of questions, we're as middle America as you get, and so we ran focus groups and we did polling, and it all came back, and we realized that it wasn't telling us, we didn't know any more after than we did before. And he said, somebody in the meeting basically said, all things being equal, why don't we just do the right thing? So they came out for marriage equality. And he said, and then they just sort of braced themselves for impact. And he said, and this is what happened. We got no backlash to speak of. He said, what we did get was tons of thank you letters, a lot of attaboys from the general community. And he said, the other thing we got was within our company, our employee resource groups, morale in our company shot through the roof. And it wasn't just our LGBT employee resource group, it was all of them. Because we had demonstrated to them that we were willing to walk the talk. We didn't just talk about diversity, we were willing to, we were showing our employees that we really had their back. And we did care about their lives, not just 9 to 5, but the quality of their life throughout. Now, I have the privilege of being on the Florida Chamber of Commerce Board of Trustees. We spent a lot of time talking about this, and one of the things that Richard Florida has identified, that the Chamber's research has identified, that the Knight Foundation Soul of the City has identified, is that quality of life draws people even more than salary. And quality of life and equality are tied together. And so I wanted to invite our two panelists who are part of our advisory board to talk about what it means from inside your companies to work in a place that actually does walk the talk when it comes to equality. So I'm going to start with you, Dr. Sanchez. And feel free to come on up.
Great. So thank you. So I'm recently from, or just moved back to Tampa. I grew up in South Florida. Then I went to undergrad at University of Florida, and then I left. I went to medical school in Boston and never came back. I was in LA most recently, and there I was part of a cancer hospital in LA, much like Moffitt, where I was fortunate to come back and join. The reason we came back to Tampa is because my family's in South Florida and eventually wanted to make our way back down to Florida. And that brought a lot of fear, coming from an area like LA where you can walk hand in hand with your partner and no one says anything, giving that up and coming to a city where the unknown presents itself, presented us with a lot of fear in making the big decision to come to Florida. So for me, coming to Moffitt, I learned that equality means business in two different ways. It means business in that you can attract and keep high-quality employees, and I think it also means business in that you can attract and keep good customers. So as I said, when I moved to Florida, I was worried. You know, surgery in and of itself is a very male-dominated, white male field, and I'm very much not that. So when coming here, I thought, well, I have a couple of strikes against me to boot. If I come out right away, then that's going to be the third strike. Is that going to be the one that kicks me out? But I said to myself, well, I was out in LA, and why not be out right from the beginning? So 2 weeks into my first job, my first day at Moffitt, was our Christmas party. And I went with my partner, and if they didn't like it, too bad kind of thing. And it actually worked, so thankfully. Took a lot of martinis, but we did it. So I learned that you just have to kind of be yourself. And if you are yourself, you can kind of show that yourself to the rest of the group, and that nervousness goes away. My first acclimation with Moffitt Cancer Center as an employee kind of was set by our onboarding day. And that onboarding day was a day full of different HR talks and benefits talks, and you have to select your insurance and things like that that I was, you know, not super interested in. But what did strike me of that day of onboarding was the language of the onboarding process. And that really, for me as a new employee, set the stage of what Moffitt cares about or what they think is important to their employees. Little things like gender-neutral language. It wasn't that all doctors are men and all nurses are women, because my partner's a man and he's a nurse. So that gender-neutral language was very much appreciated by me. The other language that I thought was really interesting was that right from the beginning, it was your benefits are for you, your partner, your spouse, whatever it is that you consider to be part of your family. And that was very appreciative, and I was very appreciative of that. Little things like that really made a difference to me, probably not to anyone else in the whole room, but I really appreciated that. And I think as a new employee, it really set the stage for me saying, well, this place is welcoming to me and wants me to stay here. So all those fears that I had in moving over across the country were suddenly starting to be diminished slowly, one by one, which really made me feel much more welcome. Lastly, our interest in LGBT healthcare also made me feel more at home at Moffitt. So Moffitt, even before I got there, has been a champion in LGBT health and has won numerous awards for LGBT health. And I took it upon myself to continue that tradition at Moffitt, to continue our partnership with some of our other sponsors, and to grow that field. LGBT health is a new topic. It's something that's just recently being described now. And just if I could wear my MD hat for a little bit, LGBT health is very, very important because we've learned over time that gay men and women don't necessarily have the same health issues that straight men and women may have. I can give you a couple of examples that we've learned in some of our research, that smoking is much higher among LGBT populations than among straight populations, obviously increasing your risk for lung cancer. We've also learned that screening is different. Let's just say, for example, you have a transgender patient. The patient is and presents herself as a woman, but she is genetically a male. That patient still needs a prostate exam because that patient still can develop prostate cancer. So the provider, not knowing that that patient is A, transgender, and B, remembers that that patient still has a prostate, will forget that that patient needs a prostate exam, and that patient can develop prostate cancer. So there's a lot of education that needs to go on with this, and Moffitt, thankfully, is at the forefront of helping people realize that there is a healthcare problem, a healthcare disparity, and we need to teach the patients and we need to teach the providers. So on to that, the second point that I think that equality means business is that you can attract new business. In my case, that means new patients. I've had the fortunate ability at Moffitt to kind of expand our LGBT health program. And because of that, we've attracted new patients. For instance, just last week, I had a patient who's an orthopedic surgeon in Lakeland who was getting his health care in New York. So he was flying to New York with one of his buddies from residency who was doing his anal screening because there was nobody in Tampa who would ever do this. Thankfully, now there is somebody in Tampa who does it. So now he started to see me and is very grateful that there is somebody in Tampa that can do that. So I think there is a role to fill, even in a cancer center where we're not necessarily advertising and looking for the next patient as you would in a major corporation, that there is a home for LGBT patients. And I think that is an attractive feature for them to know that they are welcome in a place where people know and care about their specific needs. So I can only say as a new employee in a very LGBT-friendly hospital, it's welcoming. I felt right at home, and it makes me want to pay back. And the way I pay back is by giving to the community who needs our help. So I've been very fortunate, and thank you for inviting us to join our group. I can speak on behalf of Moffitt and Dr. Green that we're very proud to be part of the Equality Means Business program, and we look forward to a very exciting future with the group. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I just have trouble with these mics holding them the right way. So this is my second roundtable, and it always brings up emotions for me and a bit of introspection. Because I come from a company where we have a leader like Pat Garrity who is stepping up and doing the right thing over and over and over. So there's no doubt in my mind where his heart and mind are in terms of the right thing to do for the LGBT community. My journey began about 10 years ago. I, like Dr. Sanchez, was a former Angelino, lived in Los Angeles. I spent 15 years in California, and that was my home. Florida was a place I would fly to visit mom and dad. Tampa was a place I would fly to because that was the closest airport, and it was cheaper than Sarasota and offered me more direct flights. It was never a place I considered to be home. California was home for me because it was safe, because it was a place where I knew I didn't have to pretend or lie or be afraid to walk the streets. Over the past 10 years, things have changed. In 2003, my mom was getting older. She's 79 today, and she said to me, "I don't want to die with my son out in California flying to my funeral in Florida. I want you to seriously consider coming home." And I said, "Mom, this is home. Los Angeles is home." And she said, "No, home is here in Florida." And that was a very, very difficult decision for me to make. And she knew full well all of the things that I had to consider at the time. I had a very successful job in the San Fernando Valley working in behavioral health care. I had a direction in terms of becoming a partner in the organization I worked in. Great relationship with my CEO. Loved the community I lived in. Loved the state of California. And she said to me, "Be sure that you're doing this for the right reasons. I don't want you to do this for me. I want you to do it for you because you value being with your family." And I said, "Without a doubt." But the first thing on my mind when I got back and thought about finding a job was, can I be out in Tampa in the workplace? This is 2003. And I tell you, I lost some sleep over that because I had been out in California for 10 years. It was a non-issue. Coming here, it was an issue. I could have been fired. I found out about this. I actually did research back in 2003, and I thought, there is nothing here to protect me. There's nothing here to save me from somebody in an organization simply not liking me for my sexual orientation and making it very difficult for me to get promoted or to get ahead or potentially even to fire me. In the 10 years since then, if I think about what has made the biggest difference in my life, why I choose to stay here now. It comes down not just to what Florida Blue is doing and many other companies. It comes down to individual people. It comes down to three things: respect, trust, and a sense of connectedness. And that doesn't happen in a silo. That's because people in my organization, my boss, my CEO, the business community that I am part of in this community, the St. Pete Chamber, Chris Steinacher, Greg Holden, the mayor, all of you, make me feel like I have a personal connection to this community, that I am respected and I am safe, which allows me to reach my full potential as a business person. So instead of talking about all the wonderful things Florida Blue is doing, and they're doing wonderful things and taking a leadership role, I want to say that at the end of the day, what makes the difference is everything that each of you can do individually to make a difference. I had a conversation with a gentleman who I will not name, who I respect and admire very much. And he shared with me his regret at being in board meetings and conferences where he would hear gay jokes, homophobic remarks, and said to me, I regret not having spoken up. This is a man that's nearing retirement, not working for the money, but working because he loves to work. And I said to him, it's all right, you're getting involved now. You're making a difference now. And I meant it. So I will leave the same to you, same advice. Make this a safe, connected, respectful community. And the money will come. The development will come. The economy will improve. People will want to be here. And not just LGBT people, but people from all walks of life. It'll rub off. Thank you.
That's what it's all about. And we wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions. And I also want to bring one more person to the panel, because one of the great things about Tampa being such a beacon is it is in stark contrast to the county, which has been anything but. And the only good thing that has come out of the homophobia of the Hillsborough County Commission is that it inspired our next speaker to run for office, and he is transforming Hillsborough County. Please join me in welcoming Commissioner Kevin Becker.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming here today, and we do have some great leaders in our community and in our state now. Joe, you're doing a fantastic job. In fact, Joe, it's interesting, I first met Joe, both Joe and I went to a Victory Fund training, which is a political training institute that helps people run for political office that are LGBT. And got to know Joe well, and I know that after spending that time with Joe there, that he was going to go on to do great things. And he wasn't sure what he was going to run for at the particular time, but I think he made the right choice, and I think he's serving the state of Florida very admirably. So, Joe. And Bob, Mayor Buckhorn here, he's been a great friend of mine. And you know what, Mayor, you have done some extraordinary things to advance quality and also economic development in our community. You've been a great friend. And as a great friend, I do also have that opportunity where I can wet your parade, rain on your parade a little bit as well, because as you were talking about a couple years ago, Tampa being 2 or 3, I saw Catherine and Nadine over there. They're cringing a little bit, biting their tongue, and wanting to correct you. Tampa was actually had a score, I think, of 66 or 67. You were near the bottom of the state. But at the same point in time, Bob, this is a real credit, Bob. This is where I think you have you haven't given yourself enough credit for what you and the city council have done to bring face of equality to the city of Tampa, and to go from a couple years ago from basically a D all the way up to B plus approaching A is just absolutely phenomenal. So I applaud you and I thank you for that. I was going to ask, I was looking around the room and just wondering how many of you have been with your company or your organization for at least 5 years? How many of you would have found yourself at an Equality Means Business forum 5 years ago, assuming that this was in place, representing your company, talking about what equality in business means? Okay, a few of you. How many of you have been with your companies 10 years or more? How many of you 10 years ago would have found yourself representing your company at an Equality Means Business forum? Still a couple. Let's go back one more. 20 years. How many have been with your company 20 years or more? There's a few of you. How many of you would have found yourself talking about equality in your business 20 years ago? We've got one standing over here. Well, I think it's pretty evident. You've heard some of the facts and the figures that have been presented to you. And I think the reason why you are seeing more corporations and the business community getting involved in promoting equality is because they get it. We get it here that it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do to make sure everybody is treated equally, fairly, with human dignity and respect. And I don't want to boil all of this down to the corporate world that it hinges on money, but a part of it hinges on money. They also understand the importance of attracting great people to their company, like Dr. Sanchez and like Nick, into their corporation, and what it can do not only for their bottom line, but what it can do for their company and how it can grow their company, not only on a community-wide, but on a worldwide basis and larger. And so they get it. And when you look at an $800 billion industry, $800 billion economic impact plus that the LGBT community has in this country, it is no wonder that corporations and companies get it. When they are looking to relocate, that is why it is so important that they look for a culture that will support the creative class as Richard Florida refers it to, and why it's so important to relocate it to a community that has inclusive public policy. But at that same token, I think it kind of makes you wonder why that if corporations and companies get it, why doesn't the public sector get it? And this is what I find interesting. And I'm going to make some generalization because there are exclusions. There are exclusions like our mayor of the city of Tampa, who, Bob, now I have noted this is the second time that you have brought this to attention that Hillsborough needs to do something. And so I know you're very competitive in nature. I have translated that to mean that I am the straight guy leading the equality effort in Tampa. You're the gay guy in the commission. You better get to work. So I hear what you're saying, Mayor. See, we can kid like that. Very competitive, as so am I. But I think it has to do with how we define our bottom line. Corporations have defined their bottom line. Obviously, they want to grow the value to their shareholders. They want to grow their economic bottom line. They want to grow their human capital. And so that's their bottom line. The difference is that the private sector stands on a solid foundation of economics and sound public policy, but the public entities, such as government, we stand on the unstable foundation of politics, consistently subject to the seismic tremors of political activity and the shifting of the political landscape. And ladies and gentlemen, I think that's what we have been dealing with over the period of time. It has not been just always the politically popular thing to do to support the LGBT community. It was that way, not just, by the way, just doesn't apply just to the LGBT. There was a time through the whole civil rights movement when it was not popular to support African Americans, when it was not politically popular to support women in positions, and to many extents, it still is not today. Laws have changed to prohibit some of the discrimination, but don't kid yourself that laws have made all of those things go away. So part of it is the political environment. Now, I will tell you, as Bob has pointed out, and as I realize, Hillsborough has been a little bit on the slower end and getting it. And yes, no, we still don't totally get it. However, I do believe that we have taken small steps in moving forward. We have actually put in our strategic plan in last year in 2013. We have put in statements that actually recognize diversity as one of the top 3 strategic points that we want to promote. We want to promote good public policy that represents the diverse community that we live in and be respectful for the people that are there. And last year also, and some of you may have also recalled, when we talk about the history of Hillsborough, it's kind of interesting because we have not only moved forward at a period of time, we actually moved backwards. We had a human rights ordinance that was in place in 92, and that was reversed in 94 by the county commission. In 2005, the county commission voted to ban government-sponsored gay pride events in Hillsborough County. That was actually repealed finally 8 years later, last year. Yes. And we also just this year, finally, after it took a year and a half to get this going, but we finally have a county diversity advisory council that has LGBT representation in place on it. And they have actually now are in the process. We finally got the structure up, and they're working on their strategic plan. And they're going to be looking at ways that Hillsborough County can become a more inclusive county here. But with that, there's still much work to do. And that's where actually I need your help. Because all of you in the business community, you get it. You get what economic value diversity brings to a community. The public sector needs the help from the private sector to understand that. We need your help to be able to build the solid ground that we need to advance forward on public policy. I can't do it alone. Bob has a lot more authority in his position. He's done a great job. But every single one of my colleagues, the people in Tallahassee and the people in Washington need the help of the business community to move public policy forward. They need to hear from each and every one of you the importance, the economic importance, the economic value of attracting people to the community, to their community, to growing the community. Because right now they don't get it. They think it's all about the politics, the people that support them, that give them money to get into office. I think there's a misconception that people in Hillsborough County don't appreciate diversity. We actually sanctioned a poll, and actually it was done by the Kitchens Group back in 2012, that showed that 73% of this community would support a comprehensive human rights ordinance if there was an opportunity to pass it. And surprisingly, over 67% of those people were Republicans too, by the way. So don't make this just a political partisan issue. It is not. But we need the help of the business community. And that's why I am actually here to appeal to you. One of my great mentors, and a person I wish I would have gotten to personally know, but he inspired me to run for office, the late Harvey Milk once said, "I am here to recruit you." And ladies and gentlemen, I am here to recruit each and every one of you to help make Hillsborough County a more diverse and inclusive county. Because I absolutely believe that with your support, we can provide the foundation to make this county a more inclusive and diverse county. So I'm going to be around here a little bit afterwards. I want to also recognize somebody very important from my office, Renee Warmack. So I wear the face of the office. She's part of the brains. And so we want to hear from you, and you're willing to help us move this county forward. So thank you again for each and everything that you all do to make this county a better place.